Three women, one quiet house, no forced sentry, no obvious struggle, no screaming in the night, no trail leading away, just an empty home, and a mystery that has haunted Springfield, Missouri for more than 30 years. In the early hours of June 7th, 1992, Sherrill Levitt, her daughter Suzy Streeter, and Suzy's best friend Stacy McCall vanished from a home on East Delbar Street. Their purses were left behind, their cars were still in the driveway, their clothes, jewelry, and everyday belongings remained exactly where they should have been. But the women, gone. No bodies have ever been found, no one has ever been arrested, and after all this time, the silence around what happened inside that house is still just as chilling as ever. Before this story leaves the cars in the driveway, a dog pacing the floor, and an entire town asking questions no one can answer, hit like, follow, and subscribe. Because in this case, somebody definitely had a plan, and unlike our three missing women, your comments should not disappear without a trace. Welcome back to Haunted in Between. This is episode 7, The Springfield 3. Springfield, Missouri in 1992 was the kind of city people thought they understood. Big enough to feel active, small enough to feel familiar. It wasn't some anonymous sprawl where neighbors never looked up from their driveways. It was a place where people knew streets by names, where high school graduations brought together families who had watched one another's kids grow up, where a quiet neighborhood home didn't automatically feel like the setting of a nightmare. That's part of what makes this case so deeply unsettling. Nothing about the setting prepares you for what happened. This wasn't an isolated cabin in the woods, not a dangerous motel, not some back road house miles from other people. It was a regular home in a regular neighborhood. The kind of place where if you drove past it in the daylight, you would never imagine anything terrible happened there. And maybe that's why this case has never really loosened its grip on people. Because if three women can disappear from a place like that, quietly, cleanly, and leave behind almost no answers, then safety itself starts to feel fragile. June 6, 1992 was supposed to be a happy day. It was graduation day at Kickapoo High School. Students walked across the stage, families applauded from the stands, pictures were taken in caps and gowns. For 18-year-old Stacy McCall and 19-year-old Suzy Streeter, it was one of those nights that should have been remembered for all the right reasons. A milestone, a celebration, a doorway into the next chapter of life. Suzy and Stacy were close friends, the kind of friends people often remember as a pair. They spent the evening doing what newly graduated teenagers do. They bounced around between graduation parties, talked with classmates, visited friends, laughed, celebrated, stayed out too late because that's what nights like that are for. At first, the plan was simple. After the parties, they would stay at the home of their friend Janelle Kirby. That plan mattered because it means what happened later wasn't the result of some elaborate setup anyone recognized in the moment. It came down to something much smaller. A harmless change in plans. When the girls got to Janelle's house, it was crowded with relatives. There wasn't really room. They made a different choice. They would go to Suzy's house instead. Her mom was home. The drive was short. They could sleep there and still meet up the next day. Nothing about that decision felt dangerous. Nothing about it suggested finality. But sometimes life-changing moment doesn't look like a threat at all. Sometimes it looks like a shrug and a sentence like, let's just go back to my house. To understand why this case still hurts people the way it does, you have to know who these women were. Not just their names, not just their ages, but the shape of their lives. Sherrill Levitt was 47 years old. She was Suzy's mother, a cosmetologist, a woman friends described as vibrant, sociable, stylish, and full of energy. She cared about her home and about appearance, about making a place feel warm and intentional. She had recently moved into the house on East Delmar Street and was proud of it. It wasn't just another address. It was a fresh start, a place she was building into something beautiful. The night before the disappearance, she spoke with a friend by phone about refinishing a piece of furniture, an armoire. That detail may seem small, but it matters because it places her squarely in the ordinary world. Talking about home projects, thinking about tomorrow, living a normal life. Nothing in that conversation suggested fear, panic, or any sense that danger was close. Suzy was 19, young, social, energetic, and right at that age where adulthood is beginning but still hasn't settled into any final shape. People remembered her as lively and independent. She had personality, presence, the kind of person who brought energy into a room. Like many young people at that age, her life was layered with friendships, relationships, family tensions, and the uncertain freedom of early adulthood. She was still figuring out what kind of person she would become, still building her future in time. And on that last night, she was doing what a lot of 19-year-olds do, celebrating, making plans, and living fully inside the moment. Stacy was 18. Friends and family described her as dependable, kind, and close to her parents. One of the most important details about Stacy is this. She was known for checking in. She called home. She let her parents know where she was. She was not that kind of person who simply disappeared for a day without telling anyone. That fact became one of the earliest reasons her family realized something was seriously wrong. When Stacy failed to check in, it wasn't brushed aside as teenage spontaneity. It was taken seriously because it didn't fit her. Together, these three women formed a heartbreaking combination: a mother, a daughter, and the daughter's best friend. Three women in different stages of life, three different temperaments, three different futures, all intersecting inside one house on one summer night, and all three would be gone by morning. The house itself was modest, single-story, ordinary, the kind of place people pass every day without really seeing. That night after the graduation parties, Suzy and Stacy arrived sometime after 2 a.m. Sherrill was likely already asleep. Early around 11:15 p.m., she had finished that phone call with her friend and apparently settled in for the night. By the time the girls got home, the house was dark and quiet. Nothing looked out of place. Nothing suggested that anyone had entered, waited, or watched. The girls moved through their normal nighttime routines, and this is where the case becomes especially haunting, because we know parts of what they did, not from witnesses, but from the things they left behind. They removed their makeup, placed their jewelry on the bathroom counter, set aside clothing, prepared the bed. There were damp washcloths, folded clothes, the ordinary details of girls getting ready to sleep after a long night out. Suzy had a new king-size waterbed. Friends later remembered how excited she had been about it. That one tiny detail has stayed with people for decades because it makes the whole thing feel so immediate, so real. You can almost picture it. The girls coming in quietly, the television still on in the bedroom, laughter kept low so they wouldn't wake Sherrill, maybe talking about graduation, maybe talking about boys, maybe talking about what they were doing the next day. The little family dog, Cinnamon, was somewhere in the house too, curled up, half asleep, oblivious to what would soon happen. And then, at some point after that, the ordinary night ended, not with a crash anyone remembered, not with a scream that sent neighbors running, just with silence. Three women inside one house, and somewhere between that quiet bedtime routine and sunrise, everything changed. At around 9 a.m. on June 7th, Janelle Kirby and her boyfriend Mike Henson arrived at the house. The plan was to pick up Suzy and Stacy for a trip to Whitewater, the water park in Branson. It should have been simple. Knock on the door, wake them up if needed, get moving. Instead, Janelle noticed something that immediately felt strange. All three cars were still there. Suzy's car, Stacy's car, and Sherrill's car. If the women had gone somewhere, why leave every vehicle behind? Still, people make unexpected choices all the time. Maybe someone picked them up. Maybe plans changed. Maybe they had already left with friends. Janelle knocked, and no answer. She knocked again. Still nothing. The front door was unlocked. That detail has echoed through the case for years. Unlocked. Had someone forgotten to lock it? Had one of the women opened it during the night and never gotten the chance to secure it again? Or had whoever left that house last done so in a hurry? Janelle stepped inside. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The small Yorkshire Terrier, Cinnamon, came running towards her, agitated and whining. Something had unsettled that dog. Janelle began calling out for Suzy and Stacy. Still no answer. She moved through the house. At first glance, nothing looked violently wrong. No furniture overturned, No shattered windows, no bloodstains, no obvious evidence of a fight. And then she started noticing the details. All 3 purses were inside, together. That is one of the strangest and most important facts in the entire case. Women may leave without a jacket, without perfect makeup, without remembering every little thing. But purses? All 3 of them? Together? That doesn't suggest a voluntary outing. In the bathroom, the girls' jewelry and makeup items were still there. Used wipes, washcloths, signs that had gotten ready for bed just as expected. Stacy's folded outfit for the next day sat where it should have been, as though she fully expected to wake up, get dressed, and go about her day. In Sherrill's room, the bed was unmade. Her reading glasses were on the nightstand, a book lay open nearby, her cigarettes and lighter, 2 items people later said she'd never went anywhere without, were still in the house. What Janelle and Mike were seeing was not a house that looked abandoned. It looked interrupted, as though life had paused mid-motion. And then there was the porch light. The globe covering it had been shattered. Glass lay scattered outside. At the time, Mike did what a lot of people would do in that moment. He grabbed a broom and swept it up. Not to destroy evidence, not because he thought nothing was wrong, but because Janelle was barefoot and he didn't want her stepping on broken glass. That simple, well-meaning action may have destroyed one of the only visible signs that something had happened at the house. At that point, though, they still didn't fully know what they were dealing with. Then, the phone rang. Janelle answered, probably hoping it would be one of the missing women. Instead, a man's voice came through, making vulgar sexual comments. She hung up, startled. Moments later, the phone rang again. The same voice. More obscene remarks. She slammed the phone down again. Calls disturbed her, but they may have been easy to dismiss in the moment as a sick prank. Later, that detail would take on a much darker tone, because once people realized the women were truly missing, they had to ask, who was calling that house and why? As the morning turned into afternoon, another person began to realize something was wrong. Stacy McCall's mother, Janice. Stacy hadn't called. That wasn't like her. That mattered. Families know the difference between a small delay and a real silence. Janice knew her daughter's habits, and Stacy was dependable. She kept in touch. As the hours passed, concern sharpened into fear. Eventually, Janice drove to the East Delmar house herself. When she entered, Cinnamon, the dog, came rushing towards her, trembling and upset. The atmosphere in the house was the same one Janelle had walked into earlier. Stillness. Silence. 3 women absent, but all the signs of their lives still present. The purses, the clothes, the cars outside. Janice understood almost immediately that this wasn't a harmless misunderstanding. Something was very wrong. Then she noticed the answering machine. Its light was blinking. A message had come in, possibly a clue, possibly the clue. She pressed play. A male voice began speaking. Before she could properly process the content, the machine automatically erased the message after playback. Gone. Just like that. That erased message had become one of the most agonizing missing pieces in the entire case. What did it say? Was it another prank call? Was it connected to the women's disappearance? Was it from the abductor? Or was it something that would have turned out to mean nothing at all? No one knows. Within minutes, Janice called police, and Springfield's most famous missing persons case had begun. When Springfield police arrived, they found themselves facing a situation that was immediately unusual. 3 women missing from one home. No clear signs of struggle, no forced entry, no obvious theft, no visible blood. There were only fragments, an unlocked front door, a broken porch light globe, a house full of belongings, a nervous dog, and the unnerving fact that one seemed to have left on purpose. The purses were especially troubling. So were the cigarettes and lighter. So were the girls' clothes for the next day. Something suggested that the women had expected to remain at the house and continue with normal life the following morning. That narrowed the possibilities fast. You know what's weird? Most of the stories we tell on Haunted in Between happen in the space where your mind is tired, your guard is down, and things feel just a little off. Late nights, long edits, too much silence. And if you're anything like me, caffeine becomes part of that routine. Here's the thing though, most energy drinks make me feel worse. Jittery, foggy, like my brain's racing but not actually focused, which is ironic when you're trying to tell stories that require focus. That's why I switched to W. W wasn't made by some massive corporation. It was made by a gamer who got sick of the junk. Sugars, dyes, blends that do nothing but crash you later. W cuts all that out and uses coffee fruit extract, which helps with the mental focus without the sharp spike and drop. It becomes part of my late night routine, recording, researching, edits, staying present when the stories get dark. If you want to try it for yourself, you can use my promo code HauntedInBetween for 10% off at checkout. Let's get the dub. The link's in the description. Now let's get back into the story. If they had left, they almost certainly didn't leave willingly in the orderly sense. Investigators considered whether someone had knocked on the door and been admitted inside. Maybe someone familiar. Maybe someone in a position of authority. Maybe someone using a story believable enough to get one of the women to open up. If that happened, things could have escalated quickly, particularly if the intruders had a gun. 3 women can be controlled fast when surprised and weapons are involved. One theory later floated by investigators was that the family dog might have been used as a ruse. Perhaps someone let Cinnamon out, then knocked and pretended to be returning the dog. It was never proven, but in a case with so little visible evidence, it's one of those theories that linger because it feels disturbingly plausible. And yet, even that doesn't solve the biggest problem. How do you remove 3 women from a house so quietly that neighbors hear nothing meaningful? How do you do it without leaving behind some stronger sign of panic or resistance? That question sits at the very center of the case and has never gone away. By that evening, police knew this was no ordinary missing person call. 3 endangered women were gone, and there were almost no leads. Officers canvassed the neighborhood, door to door, asking the same desperate questions. Did you hear anything? See anything? A strange vehicle? A scream? A late-night visitor? Most neighbors had been asleep. Many reported nothing unusual. No one came forward saying they heard a violent struggle. No one described a terrified woman running outside. One person later mentioned hearing the porch light shatter around midnight, but even that was vague and difficult to pin down. Meanwhile, search efforts quickly widened. Police, volunteers, and family members began combing nearby areas, fields, roadsides, wooded lots, bodies of water. As time went on, the search radius stretched further into the Ozarks, where hidden spaces are plentiful and the land can keep secrets for a very long time. The Missouri Highway Patrol and the FBI eventually became involved. Posters went up, thousands of them, at gas stations, storefronts, telephone poles, and public boards. 3 faces, 3 names: Sherrill, Suzy, Stacy. And every one of those posters carried the same hope. Maybe someone saw something. Maybe someone recognized a vehicle. Maybe someone knew who had come to that house that night. But days passed, then weeks, then months, and nothing meaningful surfaced. Investigators worked to build as tight a timeline as they could. Sherrill's last known activity was that late-night phone call with a friend. Suzy and Stacy were last seen heading to the Delmar Street house sometime around 2:15 a.m. That meant the likely window for the disappearance was relatively narrow, sometime in the pre-dawn hours between their arrival home and early morning, and that suggested planning. The women didn't vanish over the course of an entire day. They vanished in one concentrated stretch of darkness. Tips began to pour in. Hundreds became thousands over time. Among the earliest and most persistent leads was a dark green van. Witness reported seeing an older model green van in the area around the time of the disappearance. Police took the lead seriously. Witness tried to recall details. One man was even hypnotized in an attempt to retrieve part of the license plate from memory. Still, nothing conclusive emerged. No van was ever definitively tied to the abduction, and yet the image of that van stuck. Because this case offers so few physical anchors, a broken light globe, an erased answering machine message, obscene phone calls, and maybe a van. In a mystery this empty, even uncertain details become central. As the case drew more media attention, the disappearance of the Springfield 3 went beyond local news. The story struck a nerve. A mother, a daughter, and friend vanishing together from a tidy home without a trace was exactly the kind of mystery that terrified people because it felt both impossible and oddly intimate. This wasn't abstract violence. It was domestic, close. It entered people's imaginations because the scene left behind looked like so many ordinary homes. Eventually, the case was featured nationally, including on America's Most Wanted. And then came one of the most maddening moments in the entire investigation. A man called in claiming to have information, potentially crucial information. As he was being transferred, the line disconnected, and he never called back. That detail alone feels almost symbolic of the entire case. A voice appears, hints at meaning, then vanishes, just like the women did. Was he real? Was he a hoax caller? Someone who knew something and panicked? Someone cruelly toying with the case? No one could say. But the missed chance has haunted investigators for years. Because in a case with so few solid edges, even one genuine caller might have changed everything. Over the years, investigators looked hard at several suspects. The most well-known was Robert Craig Cox. Cox was a convicted kidnapper and violent offender who had been in Springfield at the time of the disappearance. Years later, while in prison, he made a chilling remark suggesting he knew the women were dead. Not missing, dead. That alone was enough to keep his name tied to the case. More troubling still, parts of his earlier alibi later weakened. That gave police reason to pay serious attention. But serious attention is not the same thing as proof. No physical evidence ever tied Cox to the house. No bodies, no witnesses placing him there. No direct confession with details only the real abductor would know. Some investigators believed he was simply exploiting a famous cold case for attention. Others felt he may truly know something. His name still sparks debate for that reason. He fits the shape of a man people want to believe could have done it. Violent, taunting, nearby. But the Springfield 3 case punishes certainty. Every suspect eventually dissolves back into unanswered questions. Other angles focus on men in Suzy's orbit. Former boyfriends, male acquaintances, who may have had grudges or motives to threaten her. One of the lingering theories involves Suzy's connection to a separate criminal matter involving a burglary, and possible statements she gave to police. That led some people to wonder whether retaliation played a role. Could someone have wanted revenge? Could someone have wanted to scare her and things escalated? Again, nothing ever solidified. There were also theories about violent local criminals, possible drifters, and even serial predators who may have been moving through Missouri at the time. Some of those theories had enough smoke to be taken seriously. None had enough fire to solve the case. As the years passed, investigators continued chasing land searches, informant claims, and burial theories. Rural plots were dug up. Tips led police into wooded areas and remote stretches of land. Prison informants made claims. People swore they had heard confessions. Others insisted they knew the women had been buried beneath concrete. One of the most talked about theories suggested the bodies might be under a local parking garage. The idea captured public imagination because it fits the emotional shape of the case. Something horrific hidden in plain sight, buried beneath everyday life. Authorities never found enough evidence to justify fully embracing that theory. And still, it lingers. That's the nature of this mystery. It creates openings for theories because it refuses to give closure. At different moments over the decades, possible remains were found in Missouri and tested. None were the Springfield 3. Each time hope rose, each time it collapsed. That repeating cycle has worn on investigators and families alike. Maybe this tip, maybe this property, maybe this witness, maybe finally. And each time the case slid back into the same awful silence. The deepest damage in cases like this is often carried by the families, because missing is different from dead. Missing traps people in a terrible middle ground. There is no body to bury, no clear ending, no certainty. Only hope arguing with dread year after year. Stacy McCall's mother, Janice, became one of the most visible keepers of this case. She has never stopped speaking about her daughter, never stopped hoping, never stopped pushing the public to remember that Sherrill, Suzy, and Stacy were real women with real lives, not just headlines. That kind of hope can sound irrational from the outside after enough time has passed, but love is not ruled by probability. For parents of the missing, hope does not disappear just because the years get heavy. It changes shape, it hardens, it hurts, but it remains. The same is true for Suzy's family and Sherrill's loved ones. Anniversaries came and went, media interviews repeated, the same photographs resurfaced, the same questions were asked, and still, there was no answer, no final truth, no clear place to direct grief, only waiting. And maybe that's why this case still affects people so deeply, because the waiting never ended. What makes the Springfield 3 case so haunting is not just that 3 women disappeared, it's the shape of the silence that followed. No bodies, no confirmed killer, no undeniable trail. No explanation strong enough to lock the story into place. Just absence. A perfect void. Most crimes leave too much behind. Blood, damage, witnesses, noise. This one left too little. And the scarcity has made it feel almost unreal. Almost impossible. But of course, it was real. A real door was opened. A real threat was made. A real sequence of human actions removed 3 women from that house. Somebody knows what happened. Somebody knew, at least for some period of time, exactly how Sherrill Levitt, Suzy Streeter, and Stacy McCall left East Delmar Street and never came back. That knowledge may still exist. In a memory, in a confession never given, in an overlooked clue, in the conscience of a person who has managed to stay silent for decades. And until that silence breaks, this case remains suspended. That may be why it has never faded. Because unsolved crimes do not simply sit in the past. They keep happening in people's minds. What if they opened the door for someone they trusted? What if the dog was part of the lure? What if the caller knew exactly what had happened? What if the erased message would have changed everything? What if the broken porch light was the only visible sign of struggle and it was swept away before anyone understood? That is the real terror of this case. Not just that 3 women vanished, but that the answer may have been close enough to touch in those first hours and then slipped away. A mother, a daughter, a best friend, all gone from one house in one night. Sherrill Levitt, Suzy Streeter, Stacy McCall. Their cars remained, their purses remained, their plans for the next day remained. Everything stayed behind except them. And after all these years, the case still forces the same questions. Who came into that house? Why those 3 women? Why so quiet? Why no trace? Maybe the truth is buried in a place no one has searched. Maybe it's happened in a memory someone has been too afraid to share. Maybe it died with the person responsible. But whatever happened on East Delmar Street did not just take 3 women. It changed a city's sense of safety. It reshaped 3 families forever. And it left behind one of the most haunting unsolved disappearances in American history. What do you think happened that night? Was it someone the women knew? A familiar face at the door? A predator who moved with terrifying speed and control? More than one person? Head over to the comments or our social media and let us know your theory. If you haven't already, don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe for more true crime, unsolved mysteries, and the stories that refuse to let go. Next week, we head to the desert outside Albuquerque, New Mexico, where 11 women were found in shallow graves in West Mesa. Some were mothers, some were daughters. Many were living difficult, vulnerable lives. And years later, no one has ever been charged for what happened to them. It's a case of silence, neglect, and a killer, or killers, who may still have never faced justice. Come back next week for episode 8, West Mesa Bone Collector. Remember, we are haunted in between. You're not alone. You're in between.